My name's Helen Campbell. I'm the Executive Officer at Women's Legal Service New South Wales. We started a bit over 30 years ago as a Women's Legal Resources Centre, and that's still a very important part of what we do. I've brought along some examples of the sorts of things we do. We produce books and pamphlets and information all about the issues for women. The motivation for the establishment of our service was a recognition that in some specific areas the law has a particular impact on women that is gendered. So we are focusing our attention on those areas where the law and policy and practices impact on women differently from the way that impact on men, and impact in a way that is disadvantageous to women. So our focus is on issues concerning sexual assault, domestic violence, family law, discrimination, particularly discrimination in the workplace around sexual harassment, parenting and carers leave, and discrimination more generally, but that's a lesser part of our practice, I'd have to say. And issues concerning care and protection, so interactions with the welfare authorities. We've always had inadequate resources to meet all the needs. Obviously, we're covering the whole state of New South Wales and half the population, and there's, about 15 of us. So we've always tried to be innovative with the way that we can use the tools that we have to hand to reach the most possible and the most disadvantaged people. So, excuse me, when we started, we were the first organisation in New South Wales to offer free confidential legal advice over the telephone. This was considered to be radical. Radical. How could you possibly give somebody legal advice over the telephone? It wasn't done anywhere else, and it was really quite frowned upon. Of course, this meant in the days when everybody had a fixed line at home and a local call that was untimed, it was an affordable way. It was often a confidential way because the women would be in the home while the man was out. And of course you didn't have itemised phone bills. So nobody would know that you'd rung up. Fantastic! If only we had that today. So we've found over the years that the use of the telephone for legal advice has become a less effective way of reaching people. It no longer has those features it had 30 years ago. And one of the accidental things that I've been engaged in is campaigning for untimed calls from mobile phones to 1-800 numbers, because we really need to, as you know, giving a proper legal advice takes time. Our average call is 45 minutes. And if you're paying for that time, that's a significant barrier to access. So we have to keep working with how to make that more accessible. Of course, a telephone doesn't suit everybody, and often people can't get through, There's 3,000 calls a year do not get through on our advice lines. We run 5 separate telephone advice lines. A women's one, a domestic violence one, a care and protection one, a working women's one, and the dedicated line for Indigenous women. We have a significant Indigenous women's program, so a quarter of our staff are Aboriginal, and we focus very much on making sure that we're accessible to Aboriginal women, because we know this is one of the most disadvantaged groups in our society. We know that a telephone of any kind doesn't meet everybody's needs and doesn't necessarily effectively target to the most disadvantaged. So if you ring up and the line's engaged, and you ring up again and the line's engaged, you give up or you persist. But what's the difference between persisting and giving up? It's the slightly more advantaged people that do the persisting. So when we look at the statistics about who's getting through on our phone lines, it's not necessarily the most disadvantaged people, and we don't have the infrastructure to triage those calls. So that is, the solicitor's just sitting there, whoever gets through gets the conversation. It's also fair to say that just because you come from a relatively advantaged postcode doesn't mean that you're not a disadvantaged person. Domestic violence, as you know, happens in the best of homes, and if you're in a controlling relationship, it actually doesn't really matter how much money the household's got. It's not very likely your husband's going to let you spend it on a lawyer. So you've got to think about the individual circumstances in a more nuanced way. But we also think about how can we best reach those that are most disadvantaged. And so we go out. We go to women's health centres. So we work in health justice partnerships throughout Western Sydney. And placing our solicitor in that context of the Women's Health Centre has two enormous advantages. The first is that the woman can see the lawyer without her husband knowing, because she can say, I need to go and get a pap smear or whatever, and it's a women's space, so he can't get in anyway. And then see the lawyer, and that provides a very confidential, safe environment. And often we'll use that as a context in which to do safety planning for women who need to escape from violent relationships. And the second big advantage is that we've got all the health and counsellors there with the lawyer, so we can provide a holistic service so that the different professionals can work together to provide that service for that woman, which has the enormous benefit of providing a supportive environment, but also placing that woman at the centre of the service delivery and wrapping the services around her so that she doesn't have to be handed on from one service to another and keep repeating on having to tell another new person the terrible story. So that's got that advantage of a multidisciplinary team approach, which we think has enormous benefits and makes the service that much more effective. We also go to places where people are negotiating a family breakdown. So we work with family relationship centres in Blacktown and Penrith, and that's to assist women to make agreements about arrangements for the children, and if we can make those agreements, we can avoid those people going into a family court litigation situation. So a lot of what we do is focused on an early intervention approach, that if we can keep people out of the legal system, we think that that's a pretty good outcome. And wherever we can assist those to make agreements, we do so. We do provide lawyer-assisted family dispute resolution where if there's been violence in the relationship, we can do a bit of shuttling between the parties and nonetheless reach agreements that will avoid litigation. We do, however, do regular court work, so we go to local courts on domestic violence list days and be the solicitor on duty for those list days at Blacktown and Penrith and Mount Druitt. And we visit women in prison. And our Indigenous women's team does a great job of going out in the four-wheel drive all around the state to remote Aboriginal communities, where we have a regular program of visiting those who are in rural and remote areas, and provide community development, community education and on-the-spot legal advice as we go around. I mean, we're never going to have enough capacity to meet all the needs, but we try and be as nimble as we can with the resources that we've got. Recent initiative...
Just ask you on that,
yeah.
What I think of it. How are you funded? What are your funding sources?
So we're a community legal centre, so we're an independent, non-profit, community-based organisation. We're funded through the Community Legal Services Program, which is a joint state and federal program. In addition and separately, we do get funding directly from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet under the Indigenous Advancement Strategy.
And is your funding at risk from the cutback in federal government funding from July of next year?
Yes, we're anticipating a 25% cut. That will mean that we will have to... We're already on a recruitment freeze. I'm already seeing people leaving. When they leave, they won't get replaced. We will have to cut back to 3 days a week on our telephone advice lines. We will have to stop going to, I don't know, I haven't even started to think about how I would choose, you know. Do I choose Penrith or Blacktown? Do I choose, something's got to go. You know, we can't, we're going to have to reduce services.
May I ask a question? Have you considered exploring other forms of funding, whether that's approaching corporations or...
Have you seen my foundation?
No, I haven't.
Join up here. So we established, 3 years ago, we established a charitable fundraising foundation. We have a regular program of events. And it's all set up on the website so you can give a regular donation. We run an International Women's Day fair. We've recently had Rosie Batty launch one of our publications.
I was going to ask about that.
It takes up an increasing amount of my time, and we certainly are doing the best that we can with that. I'm also an avid grant seeker, so I write probably 20 significant grant applications a year.
And how many of those get through?
I do the little ones, but really, what do you do with $10,000 and it's a one-off and you're not allowed to... You have to prove that it can be sustainable without any more money, and I call them the leaflet grants, you know, they're not that useful. My success rate's about 20-25%.
Right.
Often they'll be the same one that I'll resubmit to different entities over and over, because first, it has to be real, you know, it has to be for a thing. I mean, what we actually need money for is just to do what we do. But you don't get grants to do what you do. You have to say, if you give me this money, I'll do something different, extra. And so that has to be a genuine thing.
Is there an opportunity for consolidation in the area that you practice for a few charities? I'm just thinking there's that charity that collects clothes for ladies. Is there an opportunity to consolidate with other providers in that space to help you get extra funding or reduce your costs?
I think the situation is that those that give grants want it to be for something they can see and that they can count an outcome for. So aggregation doesn't give each brand a thing.
Sure, okay.
So, for example, the Seroptimists are fundraising for us at the moment, and they were quite specific when they contacted us. They said, you have to tell us exactly, if we gave you money, what would that mean? What would you do? And it has to be not, well, we would do what we do. That's not, it has to be a thing.
Can you briefly tell us about Ask Lois?
Yes, I was just about to. I was saving that for last because that's my favourite. So Lois is a legal online information service and coincidentally also Superman's girlfriend. And Lois is there as a support service for community workers. So the way that it came about was that we get requests to train community workers in family law and domestic violence issues all around the state. And we do more formal training as well for institutions like the Education Centre Against Violence. And our solicitors has significant expertise in this area. It's not an area where there's a lot of expertise, so we're in great demand. And wherever we go, people say, that was great. Why can't you come back? When can I get in touch with you again? I really need this. And so we thought if we could create an online, a virtual workshop which is there as a space that has the solicitor on hand, that has the formal training opportunities. So we run a regular fortnightly webinar that is a safe place. So it's managed, it's monitored, it's locked. You have to apply for a membership. And we have Lois is in, so the any of our members, community workers, can contact us at any time, either by email or through the online chat or by telephone. We can do warm referrals, we can do urgent advice, we can do advice for that community worker in their professional capacity, whether that's a question about their duty of care or their mandatory reporting or those issues about themselves as workers as well. So it's for the clients and it's for the workers as well. We now have over 1,000, nearly 2,000 members that are actively engaged, and every one of our webinars is getting between 80 and 150 screens on. We know that there's more eyes than screens because a lot of those country organisations will have it as their in-service, so they'll actually gather all their staff in front of the one screen to watch together and then have discussion amongst themselves afterwards. So, and that is so much more cost effective than sending a solicitor on the road for 2.5 days. I can get 30 minutes delivered from inside my own office, and it's reaching across New South Wales. Very popular. Got initially funded under the NBN rollout funding. Hasn't been funded since. We've just had to absorb that